I'd always imagined my 70th birthday would be quiet. Maybe just a small family dinner. Some cake. A few warm hugs and old stories told over wine. Instead, it turned into a grand event, one my daughter insisted on throwing, to honor everything I've done. She rented a beautiful hall on the west end of town, sent out dozens of invitations, and promised, "Dad, we're going to make this day unforgettable." Before we dive into the story, we'll love to thank you for your continued support to this channel. If you enjoy this story and stories like this, kindly subscribe and hit on the notification button so you don't miss any of our stories. We will love to hear from you also. Tell us where you're watching from in the comment section. We'll love to give you a shout out in our next video. Now let's begin. She was right. I haven't forgotten a single second of what happened. The evening began like most celebrations. Music playing softly, people arriving in elegant clothes, some faces familiar, others not so much. I shook hands, accepted compliments, and smiled politely even when I didn't feel like it. My daughter, Lydia, floated through the room like she owned it. Hair pinned high, sparkling earrings, and that proud smile of hers that always meant trouble was near. "Everyone," she announced halfway through the night. "Can I have your attention, please?" A hush fell over the room as she clinked her glass. "Tonight, we celebrate my father, this old fool right here." She pointed at me, laughing. People chuckled nervously, unsure how to respond. I felt my ears burn, not from embarrassment, but from something deeper, something sour. She went on. "He's stubborn, grumpy, and can't even figure out how to work his own phone." More laughter. "But we love him anyway, don't we?" I forced a smile, forced a nod. Inside, something snapped. I had raised her alone after her mother passed. I'd worked 3 jobs at one point to keep food on the table and shoes on her feet. When she graduated from college, I handed her the keys to my second home, the one I'd poured most of my life's savings into renovating. She called it a temporary stay, but 5 years later, she still hadn't left. So yes, maybe I was an old fool. When the speeches ended and the music resumed, I sat quietly at my corner table, pretending not to feel the stares. I overheard a distant cousin whisper, "Did she really just call him that?" Someone else laughed and said, "She always was a bit spoiled." But it didn't matter. I had already made up my mind. You see, what no one knew was that I had come to this party with a gift for myself. When it came time to open presents, I shuffled over to the table. Everyone gathered around, eager to see what the old man had gotten. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a neatly wrapped box, small, square, tied with a red ribbon. "This one," I said, holding it up, "is from me to me." My daughter chuckled again. "Of course it is." I opened it slowly, carefully, and pulled out a document. "Some gifts," I said, unfolding the paper. "Take time to ripen. Some take letting go." I held the deed high enough for her to see, though I didn't read it aloud. I wanted her to wonder. I wanted her to guess. But mostly, I wanted her to feel something, anything. She raised a brow. "What is that?" "Oh, just a little closure," I smiled. "For a foolish old man." The night ended with hugs, handshakes, and more laughter, but none from me. Because 3 weeks earlier, I had sold the house my daughter lived in, my house, for $10 to a local veterans shelter. I told them they could have it, on one condition: they wait until after my birthday to officially take it over. I even attended the signing myself. I watched them stamp the final page and thanked them for accepting it. You see, I was once a soldier too. I know what it means to come home to nothing. My daughter? She never even came home for Father's Day. And so I gave the house to people who actually knew what sacrifice meant. Lydia didn't know. Not yet. But she would. Not today. Not tomorrow. But soon. And I would be watching. The phone call came exactly 31 days after my birthday. It was just after 9 o'clock in the morning. I had just brewed myself a cup of black coffee and was settling into the recliner by the window, my favorite chair in the whole world. The same one I had napped in after long shifts, held baby Lydia in when she was teething, and stared out from when she stopped coming around. The phone rang 3 times. I recognized the number, but didn't pick up. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it rang again. This time, I answered. "Dad?" she said, her voice shaking. "Something's wrong." I leaned back in my chair, took a slow sip. "Oh, what's going on?" "There are people outside. From some shelter. They're saying I need to leave the house. That they're the new owners." "Are they wearing uniforms?" I asked, calm as ever. "Yes. They're from some veterans housing project. They've got paperwork. They're being polite, but they're saying I have to go today." "Dad, is this a mistake? What's happening?" I waited. "Dad?" she said again, this time with panic. "Tell them this is a mistake. Please. I live here." I exhaled slowly. "No, it's not a mistake, Lydia." The line went silent. For a full 5 seconds, she didn't say a word. Then, "What do you mean it's not a mistake?" "I sold the house," I said. "A while ago. Just after you called me an old fool in front of 50 guests." She gasped. "You can't be serious. You sold it." $10, I said flatly. "To a good cause. I figured someone should benefit from all the years I worked for that house. Might as well be someone who's actually grateful." "Dad, you can't. That's not legal. You didn't even tell me. You threw me out like trash." Now her voice was cracking, trembling. I could hear her pacing around, maybe looking at the movers already boxing things up, the neighbors peeking out their windows. Her perfect little world, crumbling one brick at a time. "You moved in saying it was temporary," I reminded her. 5 years later, you're still there, rent-free. And on my birthday, the one day I hoped for a little dignity, you mocked me in front of everyone." "I was joking," she cried. "No," I said. "You were showing off. There's a difference." She went quiet again. I could hear her sniffling now. "Where am I supposed to go?" "You're smart," I replied, leaning back further. "You'll figure it out." I hung up. Later that evening, there was a knock on my door. I didn't need to look through the peephole. I knew it was her. When I opened it, there she was, makeup smudged, ponytail loose, a half-zipped suitcase at her side. No designer heels this time. No crowd. Just her. My daughter, stripped down to truth and desperation. "Dad?" she whispered, eyes brimming. "Please." She didn't offer excuses. Didn't try to twist it into another joke. She just looked at me the way she used to when she scraped her knee as a child. And I stood still, hands behind my back, heart caught between ache and pride. "I'm sorry," she said. And maybe she was. But I'd been carrying the weight of her choices for too long. I'd taught her to walk, but somewhere along the way, she ran over people like me. So now, here I am, an old man, standing at the door of a house she never valued, staring into the face of a daughter I barely recognize anymore. And I ask you, should this old fool let her in? She stood there, her suitcase like a final punctuation mark in the sentence of her pride. No fancy coat, no entourage, no bravado. Just my daughter, bare and broken. The girl I once rocked to sleep on stormy nights. The woman who called me old fool, with champagne in her hand and a smirk on her lips. Now she was soaked in silence and desperation. "I'm sorry," she repeated, her voice cracking like a branch underfoot. "Please, Dad. I don't have anywhere else to go." For a moment, I looked past her, to the empty street, to the cold wind tugging at her sleeves, to the life she had built on borrowed space and borrowed respect. Then I looked down at the key in my hand. It felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the weight of 7 decades of sacrifice. "You know what hurts most?" I said finally. "Not the insult, not the laughter, not even the fact that you took my house for granted." She wiped her nose and looked up, waiting. "It's that I raised a daughter who forgot what it means to honor those who held her up when she couldn't stand." Her eyes watered. "I didn't forget." "You did," I replied. "You forgot when you mocked me. You forgot when you took without giving. You forgot when you made me feel like I was something you had to hide." She reached forward, slowly. "But I remember now. Please, let me make it right. I didn't answer right away. I stepped aside and let the silence sit between us like a third person. The hallway behind me was warm, lit by soft lamps and old pictures of her childhood. She stared into it, eyes flickering with memory. Then, I took a deep breath and stepped forward, not to pull her in, but to walk out. Come in, I said, but not as my daughter. She blinked. What? If you're coming back here, you're coming back humble. You're coming back with respect. You'll clean the dishes. You'll fold the laundry. And you'll treat this home like a gift, not an entitlement. She nodded quickly. I will. Anything. No more name-calling. No more mockery. No more old fool. Because from now on, you'll remember who kept the lights on when no one else would. Her shoulders collapsed with relief as she stepped into the house. Her suitcase followed, trailing behind like guilt on wheels. She settled on the couch without a word, eyes darting around as if she was seeing the house for the first time. Maybe she was. I closed the door gently and returned to my chair by the window, where I'd always watched the world move around me. And as she sat in the warmth, wiping away tears and staring into the silence, I asked myself, not out loud this time, but deep inside, did I let her in too easily? Or did this old fool finally teach his daughter what love with boundaries looks like? The first few days were quiet. Lydia didn't say much. She moved gently, like she didn't want to stir the air too hard. She offered to cook, to clean, to run errands. Even asked if I needed help with my medication, something she used to leave for the nurse. I watched her closely, not out of suspicion, but because I'd learned the hard way. People often behave when they're desperate. The real test was whether they'd still behave when comfort returned. By the end of the first week, she had unpacked her suitcase into the guest room. The one that used to be hers as a teenager, walls still lined with old posters and faded trophies. She sat at the kitchen table with me every morning, sipping tea instead of scrolling her phone. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. About her mother. About the old dog we buried in the backyard. About the time I chased off her first date with a wrench in my hand. She laughed then. A real laugh. One I hadn't heard since she left home the first time. But I was still cautious. Because I knew what life had taught me. People can act like rain after a drought, only to become drought again once they feel full. Then came the test. One evening, after dinner, she picked up her phone and whispered into it, thinking I couldn't hear. I'm just here for now, until he cools down. Then I'll get the house back somehow. I froze in the hallway. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I simply turned back into the kitchen, grabbed my keys, and walked out the front door into the night air. I slept in the car that night, by choice. I needed space to think, to breathe, to grieve. The next morning, I returned and found her making pancakes like nothing had happened. Sleep well, Dad? She asked. I looked at her. Really looked. She still wore that same smile, the one I had once mistaken for love. But now I knew better. No, I said. And you won't tonight either. She blinked, confused. What do you mean? I mean pack your things. You're leaving. Her eyes widened. Dad, wait. I heard the call. Lydia, I interrupted. You haven't changed. You're just hiding better. And I refuse to reward manipulation twice in one lifetime. She dropped the spatula. Where will I go? She asked, suddenly panicked again. I don't know, I said. But I suggest you start by learning how to stand on your own feet. It's long overdue. She cried. She begged. She screamed. But I didn't budge. Not this time. By evening, she was gone again. This time, I didn't feel guilt. Only clarity. Because I had given her a second chance. Not to reclaim a house, but to reclaim herself. And she chose otherwise. Now, as I sit once more in my old chair by the window, I realize some lessons don't need classrooms. They need boundaries. They need truth wrapped in firmness. I am 70, and maybe I am an old fool. But even fools can grow wise when they've lost enough. And now, the house is finally quiet. Not empty, just peaceful. If this story moved you, made you think twice, or reminded you of the value of respect and second chances, don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful, emotional stories that stay with you long after they end. And tell us in the comments. See you in the next story.